Okay, everybody. So on Diplomacy Direct, today we bring yet another eminent speaker to talk about a very important and a very rarely spoken topic about insurgencies of the Northeast being an integral and valued part of our nation. So we live by the great Indian motto, unity in diversity, but we've also always had been facing our challenges with separatism, blockism, and malicious political agendas that drive movements, um, insurgencies, terroristic activities, and defiance. Indian governance mechanism, the security forces, and the law enforcement largely succeed in upholding democracy and the individual ways of lives. However, there isn't an absolute win in persuading everyone in every area and region. Kashmir has always been in focus since our constitutional and regional formation as a nation. However, uh, a major focus has to go to another area of our vast country, that is the Northeast, which has always needed the requisite attention but hasn't received it in a way it warrants at this juncture. The urgency has now amplified as China has started salami slicing, interfering into local politics and social system, using the weak areas of vulnerabilities as mentioned earlier. So today we are going to touch base on these very sensitive issues faced with the Northeast states, and we'll try to understand the resolution of it to the fullest extent. Hi, I'm Vipul Tamhane, and welcome to yet another conversation at Diplomacy Direct. Today, we have a revered commander of our armed forces, a military diplomat, a veteran patriot who still is dedicated to his cause, to this nation. So, General Shaukin Chauhan, Param Visishta Seva Medal, Ati Visishta Seva Medal, Visishta Seva Medal, Yudh Seva Medal, and Sena Medal. He has fought in Operation Meghdut in 1984 in Siachen with his fellow Gorkhas from 11 Gorkha Rifles. He has served and commanded operations in Kashmir and Northeast with 10th Mounted Brigade. He has commanded the 8th Mountain Corps in Ladakh and has commanded Assam Rifles as Director General. In the recent past, he has served as chairman of the ceasefire monitoring group in the Northeast. And he brings immense wealth of experience and knowledge and perspective on Nepal diplomacy and Northeastern welfare. So it's my joy to welcome General Chauhan. General Chauhan, welcome to Diplomacy Direct, sir.
Thank you so much, Vipul, for calling me. I'm indeed honored by your calling me on this show.
Indeed, it's the pleasure is all on our end.
Thank you so much.
From a geopolitical standpoint, the Indian Northeast is neighboring with Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Myanmar, China. A little peep in history, the Tripura and Manipur were princely states. Nepal was bordering Tibet. As we talk about China, so basically, why don't I ask you this? What are the geographical dynamics of northeastern states with its foreign neighbors aiding India's cross-border diplomacy?
Vipul, it's good to start with the first things first. So, your question about what is the Northeast actually needs a little bit of understanding about what it comprises of and what it should be. Now, as you said yourself, Northeast India is the easternmost region of India, and it comprises of 8 states. They generally call it the 7 sisters and 1 brother.
Mm-hmm.
Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, Manipur, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, and Tripura are the sisters. And the 8th one is Sikkim, which is called the brother.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how it is, 7 sisters and 1 brother. Now, we talk about a lot of things about the Northeast, but we should be aware that actually it is the Siliguri corridor in West Bengal, which has a width of 21 kilometers to 40 kilometers.
Mhm.
That is, if I put it in miles, 13 to 25 miles, which connects the entire northeast region to mainland India.
Mhm.
It's just small corridor, right?
Yep.
And this region shares an international border of 5,182 kilometers with the neighboring countries.
Mhm.
You know, 1,395 kilometers with the Tibet Autonomous Region. I will not call it China. It's still Tibet Autonomous Region as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
China in the north, that is Tietar, China, right? Then 1,643 kilometers with Myanmar. Now, actually, it is, if you say, it is also a little more. It's another 143 kilometers more because Myanmar has not demarcated this last part of the 145 kilometers because China has not finalized its border with us. Okay? So 1643 kilometers with Myanmar, 1596 kilometers with Bangladesh in the southwest,
Mhm.
97 kilometers with Nepal in the west, and 455 kilometers with Bhutan in the northwest. Geographically, it is an area of 262,230 kilometers, which is almost 8% of the geographical area of India.
Mhm.
8%.
Yep.
That's a lot of space. But it is also home to some of the subcontinent's last remaining rainforests, which support diverse flora and fauna, several different crop species not found anywhere in India.
Mhm.
There are numerous reserves of petroleum, natural gas, which exist in the region and are estimated to actually constitute one-fifth of India's total potential. And if you look at the map of the Northeast,
Mhm.
you will find that it is covered by the mighty Brahmaputra, Barak river systems and their tributaries. That means this entire area is actually a watershed for these two huge rivers.
Mhm.
So, geographically, apart from Brahmaputra, Barak, and the Imphal valleys, some of the flatlands between the hills of Meghalaya and Tripura, the remaining two-thirds is hilly terrain, interspersed with valleys and plains.
Mhm.
And let me come to the population of the Northeast. It is approximately 46 to 48 million, with 68%, maybe 70 now, of them are living in Assam alone. Assam's population density is 397 people per kilometer.
Wow.
National average is 382 people per kilometer, right?
Yep.
But the rest of the Northeast has very low uh, population density, really low. The literacy in the northeastern region, except that in Arunachal, is higher than the national average of 74%. Okay.
Mhm.
So it has 220 ethnic groups, and that is why we will come to this. It's important because then this actually is the reason why the insurgencies are there, and an equal number of dialects. The
Mhm.
hill districts of Arunachal Pradesh or hill states, Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya, Mizoram, and Nagaland, are predominantly inhabited by tribal people.
Mm.
Even within them, there is a degree of diversity within the tribal groups. So the region's population results from ancient and continuous flows of migration from
Mhm.
Tibet, from the Indo-Gangetic India, the Himalayas, the present Bangladesh, and Myanmar. Myanmar actually plays a very important role when you organize or when you analyze the Northeast.
Absolutely.
Okay, what distinguishes these states from the rest of the country is the sensitive political location with an existence of the ethnic groups and different historical backgrounds.
Absolutely. Yep.
You know, when people say they say the Northeast, but
Mhm.
people, Northeast is not a single entity with a common political destiny.
Uh-huh.
That has to be understood by our people.
Yes.
It consists of 8 states. The region covers a geographical area of 2.55 lakh kilometers.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and the region is a gateway to Southeastern Asia.
Absolutely.
And I mentioned you the countries that, and these communities are actually living on the fringe of three great political communities:
Mm-hmm.
India, China, and Burma.
Yep.
And these communities play the role of buffer communities or bridge communities between these three great political countries and political communities.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk of something like this, Vipul, you have to be very clear that though this 40 million population accounts for only 3.1% of India's population,
Mm-hmm.
they occupy a very strategic space. And it's very important to us that this region is kept peaceful. Very, very important.
Mm-hmm.
That in lies the answer of dealing with the communities and to making sure that there is peace.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So basically, sir, so we all know, right? So, and those who of us are more into the geopolitics of the area, and as you rightly said, that as there is more diversity, tend to being at the vantage of these three nations.
Yeah.
The strategic. So since the independence, India is tackling movements and subsequent insurgencies in Northeast region from the first uprising of the Naga Hills of 1954-55, then arising from the seclusion politics, which was actually practiced by the British, which led into insurgencies in 1956, led by the Angami Jafu Fisu and the NCC being at the recruiting and operating forefront of the insurgencies. Then the Lushai Hills revolts that led to Mizoram Accord, or the Metia insurgency of 16 of 60s and 70s. With formation of the Liberation Army of Manipur, a United Liberation Front, Prepa, Kanglepa, then the Tripura National Volunteers revolted against the fundamental rights differences between indigenous and the Bengali speaking people. Then the Digboy crude oil matter, where it was sent to
Baroni in Bihar.
to get refined. Here, the unrest rose with the non-industrialization agenda until the Nunmati refinery came up. Then the All Assam Students Union, the Assam Jana Sangram Parishad revolted against the non-domicile voters in the Mangaldoi Lok Sabha by-poll. So basically, and there we see the resolution coming as an Assam Accord. Then we see Ulfa uprising, the Prafulla Kumar Mahanta government dismissal, and then the Operation Rhino, and the at parallel the Kokrajal and the Udalguri areas, where we see the NDBF and the Bodo Liberation Tigers started Bodoland movement. And then that was because of the alienation of the administrative cracks or the favoritism or language biases, land grabbing, unemployment, non-representation, fund scarcity, unstructured developments, clubbing everything into one single basket of or rather gross neglect due to bureaucracy, right? So all this is happening in the Northeast, and India being a young nation, even we are learning out of all these things. So now for the past 2 decades have gotten the Northeast a better connectivity, development and welfare funds with guaranteed and steady funds with approximate 10% of annual national budget since the creation of DONOR, the Ministry of Development of Northeastern Region, which governs the non-lapsable pool of the funds of the Northeastern region. So, sir, the question here is that learned its lessons here on what should the central government look at from the governance perspective to avoid any future conflicts that could create the ideological outbursts from the perceived neglect by the union government? Also, what will be the role of military in terms of vigilance on the borders, to keep a check on foreign elements, to create and then the responsibility of being parallel, which creates issues with central governance and national security integrity. So what are your thoughts on that?
The one thing that I didn't want you to do is you club the Northeast together. It cannot be clubbed together. These cross connects of the tribes,
Mhm.
that is the issue we must understand.
Okay.
Why is each state on fire, or why was it in fire, is something we need to understand, because the medicine for each state is different. It is not the same medicine you use in Nagaland that will be the medicine that you talk for in the Lushai Hills or Mizoram, or for that matter, Meghalaya or Manipur.
Mhm.
Every state's security situation is different. And we need to understand every state's reason. Where we go wrong, Vipul, is that we club the Northeast together.
Mm.
The previous setup, this government has created the donor ministry. Previously, they had created what was called the Northeastern Council, with
Mhm.
its headquarters in Meghalaya, Shillong.
Mhm.
And the Northeastern Council was basically a bureaucracy setup, was supposed to bring this development into the Northeast through direct funding by the government. That
Mm.
means instead of a donor ministry, the Northeastern Council would do the same thing.
Mm. Mhm.
Unfortunately, the donor ministry also does the same thing. You are running this from Delhi.
Mhm.
You are supposed to run it from each state.
Correct.
Now, let me just go quickly, right? Let's just first talk about the mother of all insurgency, Nagaland. Why did this happen? I don't know if you are aware that the British came into the Northeast on the invitation of what is the present state of Assam and Manipur. And there were a number of Anglo-Burmese wars. The reason was that Burma had actually conquered almost all of Assam and
Mm.
all of the rest of the Northeast. And when Burma had conquered that area, you know, these kings had lost their empires,
Mm.
right? They were the Ahom kingdom. They were the
Uh-huh.
princely states of Manipur and Tripura. They were deployed there for what? They had lost their empires, and if they had lost their empire, then how would you go further? And they are the ones who invited the British to the Northeast. They told the British, "Look, please come.
Mhm.
We need you to get our empire back."
Mm.
Right? And when they got the British to give them to fight the Burmese and to get their empire back, what did it mean? It meant that the British would now not go away from there.
Mm.
So
Correct.
Britain in three wars, which finally ended with the Anglo-Burma War of 1856, 1814 to 1816, 1824, then 1856. In these three wars,
Mhm.
who gained? Britain.
Mm.
They were invited to come in, they defeated the Burmese Empire, restored this, but also took the entire country of Burma. So now the British colony, which was now being ruled from Calcutta
Mm.
those days, also ruled the entire Burma from there. And this complete area, Vipul, became an area of the movement of labor for the tea gardens, for the various other issues that Britain wanted to take out from there and take it to Britain. They were enriching whom? They were enriching their own kingdom,
Correct.
but they were invited by our people. That's the issue about what you have to understand.
Yep. That's a ground zero perspective, actually.
Absolutely. So people who talk of anything else now forget history. That the British were invited by the Ahom kingdom and the king of Manipur. And when they came in, they obviously took everything. Now in this setup, where is, like I said, the insurgency start? Insurgency start was what we call the mother of all insurgencies, the insurgency in Nagaland. I'll take 5 minutes to explain it to you quickly.
Absolutely.
In 1921, after the First World War, and this was the time when Britain had used Nagas as labor and formed them into what you call the Naga Labour Corps. That the people who took part in the Naga Labour Corps got together in Kohima and formed what you called the Naga Club. 1921. In 1929, the Nagas go to the Simon Commission and they tell them that, look, you will leave one day. The day you leave, we are not a part of India. We've never been a part of India. You conquered us like you conquered India. So when you leave us both in two separate states. We don't want to be a part of India. This is 1929. The British officers at that time formed them into a Naga club, allowed them to become an association, a political association, to fight for the rights of the Nagas. They became the Naga National Council. At that time, it was only for the welfare of Nagas. But when independence started, or when the movement was clear that by 1946, Britain would leave India, the Nagas went back and said, look, we want to remain independent. We are not a part of India, because nowhere in no chronicle, in no historical setup has this part ever been a part of any empire of India. It was not a part of the Mughal India. The Mughals had only come up till Assam. It was not a part of anybody else. In 1946, there was a governor of Assam called Haidari, Governor Haidari. 46, we hadn't got independence yet. And at that time, the Nagas signed an agreement with him, a 9-point agreement. The basis of which was, we will accept being a part of India, but you will get 10 years to decide what you want to do. Geographical reality was geographical reality, but give them 10 years. But when we became independent by 1950, our Prime Minister had abrogated the Haidari Agreement and said, no, there is no choice, no question. Maybe because of our problem with Kashmir, maybe with whatever other issue. But the issue was that there was a political movement. The issue was that these places were not a part of our country. And they were different. So when you broad brush it, that is the mistake we all do. We broad brush it. We expect to rule from Delhi. But Northeast has to be taken and meant to rule from Northeast.
Correct.
Okay. Everything was a part of Assam at independence. Whether it was Meghalaya, whether it was Nagaland, whether it was Manipur was different. All these states, Meghalaya, Mizoram and Nagaland, was a part of Assam. That means there was Assam and there was NIFA, Northeast Frontier Agency, which became completely Arunachal Pradesh. And Nagaland was Naga Hills and the district of Tuensang. So when this Insurgency started in 1956 in Nagaland. 1956. Why did it start? Because we abrogated the Hydari Agreement. We did not accept the fact that we would give them a choice 10 years later.
Hmm.
You know? So when you come to know the Nagas, you realize that they do not accept, you lying. To some people, especially in the Northeast, especially the tribes, they don't lie to you.
Hmm.
They tell you the truth. That was the start, Vipul, of this insurgency, 1956. After that, we formed the state of Nagaland in 1960-61, September 60 actually, with a 16-point agreement. But after the state was formed, there was a group of people who did not accept it,
Mhm.
especially a person called Fizo, who had started his independent Naga National Council, who had now escaped and was living in Britain.
Hmm.
Whether he was being fed by the British to continue this problem there or any other way, the issue was that Fizo did not agree to the formation of the Nagaland state politically, because they said that the Nagaland state's boundaries
Mhm.
did not unite the entire tribes of Nagas.
Correct.
Since these tribes live in the state of Manipur, they
Hmm.
live in the south of Assam, the southern state part of South Assam,
Mhm.
and Nagaland.
So there are cookies, there are Chin cookies, some from Myanmar, some
Correct.
from
Correct.
Manipur, and
So these
everything.
are
Yeah,
Naga tribes. They said we want to be unified as one state, one geographical entity.
correct.
If you have read my background as the chairman of the ceasefire monitoring group, I was the one responsible to get over to break the NSCN Kaplang group. The NSCN Kaplang group is the one that broke the ceasefire with us in 2015 when they attacked that army column in Manipur, killing 18 of our people.
Yes.
This was led by a Burmese Naga called Khaplang, who was a Konyak from the Konyak tribe. So Khaplang died in 2018 and he was replaced by an Indian Naga from whose village was in the Indian side called Khango Konyak, who was his general.
Okay.
And Khango became the boss. With a lot of effort, we were able to bring Khango into India, breaking the NSCN Khaplang group. And when he broke the group, and I went and met him, and I made him sign the ceasefire agreement with us. I asked Khango, what was your ultimate aim? Why are you fighting us? Why are you fighting us for so long? He said, General, my aim is the unification of all my Naga brothers.
Okay.
So all these Naga brothers are half here and half there. So it's an unreality of the present situation. It's an unreality. It's a political unreality, right? But these people will keep fighting unless someone explains to them that these borders can be made soft. You are allowed to meet each other, and there should be no problem. So when we talk, Vipul, of the Northeast, I would again request you not to club them all together. Each insurgency has a different reason. And each reason must be looked at, discussed with them, and decided with them. For that, you need patience, you need knowledge. And once you get this very sensitive region together, you would have unified India, which is our ultimate aim.
Absolutely.
The honor of being a part of India, which is one of the best and biggest states in the world. I mean, we were the golden bird at one time.
Yep.
But the ability to keep it together, unified, lies on us, Vipul. We can't be separating each other.
Correct.
And where I find we are at fault is that we are trying to understand things from Delhi. without knowing what the truth is. Each insurgency is different, each has a separate cause,
Correct.
and it is for us to get that cause over.
So, sir, basically, every indigenous ethnic movement, even from beginning, was considered as an anti-national or
Correct,
became a
yes.
security trouble. So,
Yeah.
how should Indian diplomacy work inside out in terms of tackling the residual issues in Northeast? And here on, what should the central government look at from the governance perspective to avoid future conflicts? Like you said, integration of this thing and decentralized local governance and all, and putting that governance perspective to create an ideological or to get that notion out that now there is no more perceived neglect by the union government and we are totally at peace, and now now help us help you. So how would that happen?
First, as you said, the first issue is governance. Governance, what does it mean? Take welfare to the people, prevent crime, have police, have administrators, have food, have roads, have schools, have jobs. Governance includes all these things.
Correct.
It includes welfare, it includes houses for them, it includes running water, it includes electricity, it includes education, right to education, the right to jobs, right to employment has to be given there.
Correct. Absolutely.
That is governance. You cannot have the Assam Rifles, and I have been the Director General of Assam Rifles. You cannot have a military force pushing governance. We
Absolutely.
can't. Though Assam Rifles, we run 46 schools in the Northeast. 46 schools we run in the Northeast. But the end point is that it's an Assam Rifle run school. Some run till the 4th standard, some run till the 6th standard, some run till the 8th standard. But we are military people. It is not our job to be running schools.
Absolutely.
There are no schools otherwise. If not for the Assam Rifle schools, there's no other school. Where do these children go? Even if they go to school, some villages are so far flung that their children have to walk. There are no roads, there are no buses, there's no electricity, there's no internet. What kind of welfare are you taking to them? Then what will they believe they are part of? So my entire thing has been, if you talk of governance, take governance. That there is crime there, people.
Yeah.
There are insurgent groups. You must prevent these villagers from becoming innocent victims of these crimes.
Absolutely.
You're not preventing them. You can't have the Assam Rifles doing it. You have to have police forces there. You have to have police posts there. They don't exist. If running water does not exist, if electricity does not exist, if education doesn't exist, then what kind of talk are you giving them? So my thing would be identify the issues. One, governance is the main issue. Understand that across the border there are these brothers. Now recently the Myanmar army took over Myanmar by overthrowing Aung San Suu Kyi. This resulted in a large number of people running into our country.
Correct.
Right? While Manipur was able to, from the Moreh border, did not allow people to go in. Mizoram said we cannot stop our Chin brothers from coming in.
Correct.
Because Sagaing province or across is the Chin province.
Correct.
And Chins are their brothers. When I was talking to the Chief Minister Lalsan Hawla, when I was the Director General, and that time Aung San Suu Kyi had won and she had her ministers, he was very happy to say that, Aung San Suu Kyi has appointed 2 vice presidents as who are Chins. So they are looking at that togetherness with Myanmar. When will we understand that our population and that population are mixed and together belong to the same tribe? These are the soft borders of India. These are the difficult areas of India. And understanding these require a great deal of effort. They require a great deal of knowledge. They require a great deal of credibility, Vipul.
Absolutely, sir. Well said.
You cannot talk one thing and do the third thing. You can't.
Correct. So, sir, now that you're talking about the More border, the area in Manipur, so the insurgent group leaders are actually based in the Tamu town in Myanmar bordering Manipur.
Not really, Vipul.
And
Tamu is, if you've been to Tamu, and I really wish you'd been to Tamu, is a small, dusty village town. It's just a small, dusty village town on the border of More.
hmm,
It has a few shops that are shops because people go across, buy from them, and bring them.
sir, but
These
it
people
generally
don't
is
live there. Incorrect. They have camps
correct.
20 to 40 kilometers away from the border.
Sir, and what was happening until now is that all the tribes, those who are fighting until now together, have come together. They are training in those camps. This is all happening under instructions of the Chinese PLA, as they say. Again, these were the trained people who attacked in Chandel, the 18 soldiers that we martyred, the instance that you said some time back, and the interference of the insurgent factions from Myanmar, like the Kachin Independence Organization, the KIO, and these pockets are still in these areas, bordered and puppeted by PLA. The Myanmar military leaders are said to, often meet the PLA top leaders in the area bordering along the Yunnan province and all. Again, talking about this area in the border checkposts like the Kudang Thabi and the Palel encounter, so these areas encounter smuggling of gold, wildlife, like your pangolins, your geckos, shark fins. Also, weapons on regular basis are crossing border. There is an influx of amphetamine drugs. So they called it world is your tablets. And talking about the Kukis and the Naga tribes having territorial tribe clashes in the region, poppy cultivation is on the spring. Chin Kukis have come into this, and they have a nexus with the Nepalese border region. There are also Manipuri Muslims, the Pangals from the Sora and the Lilong. They are primarily understood to deal in drugs and everything, and which is also connected with ISI somewhere. And the NSCN IM, they get into Bangladesh via Myanmar. They get trained there by ISI. So, General Sahab, with all this going on, what will be the role of, again, military has to have uh, its presence, and it is doing the best what they could do. So, in terms of vigilance on the border states, to keep check on the foreign elements, to create nuisance within the territory, and on the border, where the insurgency and all these things are again. And second question to this is, what will be the role of intelligence agencies in this newfound internal diplomacy if we arrive at it? So it's kind of a complex situation. Could you please throw some light on it?
Throwing light on complexity means opening that onion and explaining each part of that onion properly. Okay.
Okay.
Now, the Chandel ambush was planned by the NSC and Khaplang group, who doesn't get along with the NSC and IM. Both these groups were on ceasefire with India. Why did one break and why hasn't the other one broken is something we must look at.
Mhm.
You talked of Tamu. I told you Tamu is a small little dusty town. But the main leaders and the camps are 20 to 40 kilometers away from the camp, from the country's borders.
Mhm.
Why is Myanmar not looking in the border? Because Myanmar army Myanmar firstly does not have the same resources. Secondly, the army is not large enough to look after these parts of the country. There are more than 30 insurgencies in Myanmar itself, which the Myanmar army is fighting.
Hmm.
So the border areas are not important to them. They have more or less told these insurgent groups that you look after the border areas for us. We will not chase you. Myanmar army or Myanmar is in bed with China. They may have no option, Vipul, because which is the largest country around?
Yep.
I had gone for a national level meeting to Myanmar a couple of years ago, and I was talking to the Myanmar leadership. To which one of these Myanmar leaders called me aside and said, "General, we have a common enemy. China is our common enemy." So I don't agree with you in saying that Myanmar does not realize that China is an enemy to them. They do. They just don't have any option. Is Myanmar helping these insurgent groups? I would say no. They're only not attacking them because they don't have the capability. Who is to give them that capability is who is being affected most. India is being affected most. So we must give the Myanmar army capability to fight these chaps in their area. Can we go into Myanmar to attack them? We did it. We've been doing it for the last 20, 30 years. But we should not go more than 20 odd kilometers. Now the camps have shifted to 40. There's no way we can cross and come back. It will have to be the Myanmar army helping us out. We've taken this issue up with the Myanmar government many times. But Myanmar itself is a poor country and it's difficult for them to do that. So, is the Kachin army or the insurgency army, KIA or the KIO, helping these guys? Well, they're all together and they're getting money out of it. There is gun running, there is wildlife running, there is drug running, there is issues like that. Some Naga groups do not do any drug running, like NSC and IM does not allow drugs. No women trafficking in drugs is done by the NSC and IM. It is also the largest group there. But because it's the largest, most powerful group, it is the group that can do a lot of stuff and has a threat in being, and therefore we must retain them in peace. Like I said, each group has to be dealt with separately, each part has to be dealt with separately, each part must have an answer through people who know the issue. Right? You talked of diplomacy. There are, you called internal diplomacy, or you called it, you said intelligence agencies. Exactly what the intelligence must do. They must find information, they must meet these people, we must get them to accept our peace, and we must get them to agree to living together in peaceful existence in India. You can't keep saying it is left on information or not, this is not happening or that's not happening. As far as we are concerned, they have the ability, they've been given the funding, they have the manpower, and they have to do their job, which is getting us information. So governance has to reach, protection has to reach, police has to reach. Everything cannot be done on the ground. A lot of things are political in nature. You have to get education there, get jobs there, make that better. You said roads have to be made. Everything has to be made. And once the people believe that the country believes in them and has a stake for their coexistence, peaceful coexistence, and that they will live a life of what I would say an ability to sustain themselves, why should they be in insurgency? 99% of the people there, Vipul, believe in the idea of India. They believe that India is the country that they are a part of. They are now very proud of India because they see that Myanmar or Bangladesh do not give them any kind of they have no ability. They know that. Now we have to tell them that you are a part of us. They are all minorities. We have to accept that minority part. We have to accept their culture and we have to bring them in. That can only be done through a great effort, but more than anything else, it has to be done with knowledge.
Absolutely.
Every village needs, like for example, let me tell you, as DG Assam Rifles, I was allotted about 5 crores to look after the border area. Border Area Development Fund. It's a separate fund in the government.
Mhm.
Each village requires a separate project. Some villages growing Naga chili, somebody is growing apricot, somebody is growing pineapple, somebody growing this. He can grow pineapples for himself to consume, but if he's going to take it to the market, then pineapples have to be stored. There has to be cold storage. There has to be canning units. People have to buy that pineapple. Unless you bring the market there, how are people buying?
Correct.
Economy has to be brought in here. But like I said, despite all these issues, I am absolutely clear that 99% of the people there believe in India and feel that only India is the answer to all their answers. But we have to bring this to them. We have to bring them together. They are our brothers and they are our
Absolutely.
younger brothers.
Absolutely.
And they must be brought in with people of repute, with people of character, and not through lies. झूठ बोल के कुछ नहीं होगा. We've
Absolutely.
tried it out, it doesn't work. The only way is truth, the only way is sincerity, the only way is doing things to make sure that they give up their weapon. I have talked with all of them, all the Naga insurgent group, all the Assam insurgency groups, all of the Manipur insurgency groups. I have spoken with all. I have been there, as you know. I was a company commander there in 1988. I was a G1 operations in 1995. I was a Director General of the Assam Rifles, and I was the chairman. I spent 4 to 5 tenures in that place.
Mhm.
And I know for certain that we can bring them in, we can have peace. Only if we are honest about getting this peace.
Absolutely. On that sentiment, sir, even the NEFA. So I want to now focus a bit on the Arunachal Pradesh because the media has full coverage of Chinese encroachments at Arunachal Pradesh border. They are building villages along the Arunachal Pradesh border, giving Chinese citizenship to the Arunachalis, a bullet train to Arunachal Pradesh border, and encroachment is out in open, right? So what's your opinion on the main factors that constitute of China's Arunachal Pradesh fixation and refuting China's claim over Arunachal Pradesh? And from a reverse or from the corollary perspective is, how are Arunachalis taking this, and how should we capitalize on their sentiment of being an Indian?
Firstly, let me give you a little background. The sixth Dalai Lama was from Tawang. Okay? The Buddhist population is connected to Lhasa. The McMahon line, demarcated in 1914, included these areas in the British India. Okay? The first map of NIFA, or the Northeast Frontier Agency, in 1938 showed Tawang as a part of India. The Arunachali tribes were autonomous till 1947. NIFA was created in 1954. The present Dalai Lama moved to India through Arunachal Pradesh in 1959. He was brought in by the 5 Assam Rifles. Assam Rifles, Arunachal Pradesh was made a state in 1972. Rather, it became Arunachal Pradesh as a union territory, and it was given a statehood in 1987. Okay. Why does China wants Arunachal? Simply because, like I said, there's a Buddhist population and they feel that Arunachal is a part of southern Tibet, which it's not. It's part of India.
Yep.
But China has created this mystery. And because China is, what it is, it will create running all these issues and saying this is a part of our life, our ancient lands. It is for us to be strong. It is for us to make sure that our country is protected, our borders are protected. It's for us. There's no other way. China has to understand that it cannot bully us and push it through. The population of Arunachal Pradesh is 100% with India. 100%. But you have to bring education there. You have to bring governance there. If you don't bring governance, where will these people go? If you don't bring trade and you don't bring economics, then they'll go the other side.
Absolutely.
So it is our inability rather than the ability of China to not keep this part of the country with us. I am clear, and I've been to Arunachal, I've been to Tawang, I've been to Bumla, I've been to the last part of India, Vijayanagar. I have seen there, and I've been, my boys were a part of Vijayanagar. We have a company in Vijayanagar. We have to have a road. Can you imagine Vijayanagar doesn't have a road, functional road going to them? 72, 74, 75 years later. So there has been neglect, and unless that neglect is taken out, we will always have a problem. Like I said, you have to do the work. You have to do it on ground. You have to have people who are sincere enough to do the work. You can't choose people in Delhi and think and throw money at them and say, go and do it there. They won't do it. There's too much corruption. There are too many issues which just will not happen. Too many people are running the things and telling lies.
So again, coming back to the decentralization and local
has
governance.
To be decentralized, absolutely.
So Indian
that donor
Army
ministry ka headquarters has to be in donor, northeast mein hona chahiye. But what is important is that if you are a ministry, you have to go to the ground, and that ground is not being led.
Absolutely.
So that is the part that we must take it to. We must bring them. We must take it there. I am absolutely convinced that we require this issue. We require all the help of the government of India, and people believe in the government of India. It's not that they don't believe. They believe desperately that the government of India has the answer for them. But the government of India has to select the right people to bring that there.
Absolutely.
They are not selecting the right people. They're looking only at Delhi-based situations. There are no Delhi-based answers. Answer has to be inside.
So that brings a very broader, yet a very drilled deep down kind of a perspective from the veteran who's being there, done that. So, sir, thanks so much for giving your valuable time for this insightful conversation. I'm sure the session will prove to bring some awareness to the general population of our country regarding the scenarios faced and tackled by the armed forces and law enforcement agencies to keep the country in harmony. General Chauhan, sir, can't thank you enough for your eminent presence on Diplomacy Direct. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Vipul. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.